Probation does not mean that you can avoid process documentation.
Okay, let's get into employee exits. And just a quick one. We're going to have a poll pretty soon. So again, hopefully our poll questions can trigger to all of you how you're currently dealing with situations, how you may need help in dealing with situations. And again, hopefully, again, with our poll questions, it triggers you to say, right, what do I need to do better? What do I need to do better? So that's the purpose of those. And again, we've seen some questions come through. So I know Jenna mentioned it. Please continue to throw stuff in there. We'll definitely allow questions in another 10 minutes. All right, let's talk employee exits. There's several ways to obviously terminate employees within whether it's during a probation period, whether it's not. Let's start with the easy one. Termination due to a successful probation period seems pretty simple. Are there problematic areas that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so terminating an employee within their probation period, there are still risks. Okay. So it's really important that you don't think just because the person's in their probation period that we can flick the switch and say, see you later, because there's still risk and exposure there, more now than, say, even 5 years ago. Probation does not mean that you can avoid process documentation, those type of things. Some of the common mistakes is employers aren't across dates. That's why it's really critical that you have a strong probation review structure and framework so that if there are matters that you address them in a timely manner and you don't get to the day before the end of their probation period and say, I want to pull the trigger. Well, hang on, have you got any evidence that you've raised these issues over the last 6 months? So we generally, our best practice is you have a probation review framework, and that is doing like a formal review at 1 month, 3 month, and 5 month. And the reason that we recommend that is because then you're not dealing with the 11th hour. You've got that final month to either improve, make decisions, work out what the solution is. And within those probation reviews, you should have comments and evidence in regards to talking about the concerns that might lead to ending them under probation period. A lot of people think probation is a free pass. So for businesses with 15 and over staff, probation is 6 months. For small businesses, 14 and under, it is 12 months. However, if you have associated entities, if you're a director of other entities, even if they're not linked, connected, for example, I'm the director of Now Actually, if I was a director of an electrical company, if their staffing plus the Now Actually staffing was 15 and above, small business is not applicable, even though those businesses are completely independent, but it is an associated entity by law. So that's really, that gets a lot of people caught out.
Because I was going to say, I was going to ask you, what's your advice to people that have got it with a 3-month probation?
Yeah,
I've always advised go to 6 because 90 days go so quick.
Yeah. All contracts should have 6 months.
6 months.
Even if you're a small business, I wouldn't recommend 12 months written in there because no one's really going to sign that. That's just not fair and reasonable. If you get to month 8 and you are a small business and there's concerns, we have small business concessional rules and options to us. So it's just like another thing up our sleeve. But I'd always recommend a contract has 6 months as a probation. So if there's matters, make sure they're discussed, documented, and you've got evidence before you pull that trigger of termination, because the individual couldn't lodge a fair work claim for unfair dismissal. There might be an avenue if they haven't, but there might be an avenue under general protections depending on the situation, because there's no minimum service requirements for that. And that's kind of what we'll talk about next session. But yeah, basically the message I want to get across, don't just think probation is a free ride.
And I think, it's an interesting one. So I love the process again. Let's get back down to this. You mentioned 6 months and then 1 month, 3 month, 5 months, because on the other side of, let's say, performance and termination, there's also an element there. And I still remember in one of the businesses I was associated with, they would employ someone before they started, they wanted more money, as an example. They said, once you've completed your probation, we'll look at your salary and we'll review your salary. Again, what's it based on? So at the end of that 6 month probation, the expectation is the individual is expecting a salary increase or a bonus or whatever it may be, and they're not getting it. But if you haven't had that process to chat to them after 1 month, 3 months, and 5 months to how they are going, what happens at the end of the 6 months?
Yeah,
So,
you don't have much of a leg to stand on.
spot on,
So,
spot on. Yeah.
yeah, that's become more and more prevalent when it comes to termination under probation. It's not just you're out the door, your probation, what it once was.
Yep. Yep. So as far as termination as a result of disciplinary processing or process, what does that look like? Is that easy?
Yep. So if there's been a situation and it's been deemed that misconduct or serious misconduct has been conducted, and you've got your evidence, you've followed a disciplinary process, there might be warnings or the situation might be strong enough to terminate without any prior warnings. Termination should be your final option that you want to consider, but it is an option to you based on the outcome of a disciplinary process. So that, and again, that needs to cover the right things in your termination letter. Don't just say you're out the door because of X, Y, Z. Yeah. So that's probably the one that gets tripped up the most or challenged when it comes to Fair Work, because people haven't followed the right process to end up to the Termination Act.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
What about mutual separation? So
Yeah.
how?
Mutual separation is an option for termination when there is a situation whereby we basically negotiate an exit. It could be, it's generally not for when there's been serious misconduct, because you could easily do the disciplinary and terminate. It might be a relationship breakdown. It might be history that we know, okay, the business is going one way, you're going another way. We're just going to drag ourselves through the mud here. It's going to cause distress for everyone involved. It's generally not something that you would have with a low-level employee. It's generally more that mid to senior that you can have these conversations, generally without prejudice, and you negotiate and both parties agree that we're going to end the relationship and this is what it would look like. We're going to have notice or we're not going to have notice. There might be a golden handshake, which is basically a payment that is provided to the employee because of whatever they've negotiated. It needs to be handled sensitively. However, you also need to be aware that it could bite you as well, because you don't want it to become as a forceful resignation that I had no option. They backed me in a corner. I had to accept this. So it's really important that it's dealt with in a sensitive manner, the right approach. And then most of the time we recommend whatever is agreed by both parties, it is finalised through a deed of release or a settlement agreement. And that is both parties sign it and that they can take this matter no further. So they can't lodge an unfair dismissal claim or a general protections and things like that. So it safeguards the employer from receiving a claim within the next 21 days. And there's confidential clauses. It's not, not to be discussed from a T's and C's perspective. But that's a good outcome if you can get it. And it doesn't always need to be form of monetary, but it's a good outcome, but has to be dealt sensitively as well.
I could only imagine. I dealt with one of those probably 10 years ago, and you're right, very sensitive. And then the chatter started and suddenly it becomes very toxic within the business place.
Yeah, yeah. So make sure you get the right advice, but that's always an option
Yeah.
to keep up your sleeve. And then you've got your standard resignation. So when an employee states that then they no longer want to work for the business, they're providing X notice, or maybe they don't, and this is going to be their last day. You need to make sure that you always respond to that resignation in writing, confirm, acknowledge the resignation. I received your resignation on X date, and we confirm that your last working day is on X, and you will receive all your owed entitlements, final payout on Y. So that's really important. Don't get caught up in forceful resignation or heat of the moment resignations. If someone's, chucked a razzie and there's been, verbal and there's a heightened emotions, and they go, I'm out, I resign now, see you later. And then they might sleep on it and come back and go, oh, I'm sorry, Paul, that just wasn't me. I was really heightened. You have to consider that, okay? So, because if employees make those decisions in those moments, doesn't necessarily mean that they mean it. So be aware of that. Yeah,
Interesting.
you want to make sure a resignation is genuinely voluntary from the
Yeah.
employee's
It
perspective.
must be in writing.
Yes, yeah, get it in writing, confirm it in writing. Sometimes situations become volatile. It could be a text message. Just make sure that you cover your tracks from that perspective.
Text messages are okay.
Yeah, it's not what we'd recommend, but
No.
I have done it that way.
Okay.